Hello everyone, welcome to another of the Society of Certified Senior Advisors ongoing educational webinars. Today our topic is Understanding Hoarding in Seniors, and our presenter is Marylin Ellis. As a senior move manager and a CSA, Marylin loves helping seniors and their families downsize and get organized so they can move forward to happy, safe, and engaging lives. Her newest venture is co-founder and creative director of Points of Life, the Elder Ed Players, offering true-to-life skits on elder issues followed by panel discussions with experts in senior care industries. Apart from being a CSA, Marylin is a member of the National Association of Professional Organizers, the Mount Diablo Businesswomen, National Association of Senior Move Managers, National Council on Aging, Elder Care Matters Alliance, and is past president of the San Francisco East Bay chapter of the International Coach Federation. And believe it or not, with all of that stuff on her plate, she is still here to talk to us today about understanding hoarding in seniors. So welcome, Marylin. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm really happy to be here today. This is a subject that has just become such a hot topic, hasn't it, in the world, particularly with all the TV shows that we're seeing about hoarding. And I am really wanting this particular webinar to counterbalance the TV shows about hoarders, because in my opinion, these shows are showing them either as freaks in a carnival sideshow or as romanticizing them. And in either way, it's a terrible disservice to them and the suffering that they are experiencing. And also, it's misinforming those that care about them and want to help, which of course is all of you. So I want to talk to you today about what you can do and to really understand what a hoarder really is. First of all, it's sometimes difficult to know when to step in. These are some of the indications that are going to let you know that this is how you're going to, when you need to step in to help the senior. Ask these questions. Is their home clean enough to be healthy? And is it safe to live in? And we're going to be talking about the exact criteria for that in a minute. Is there so much clutter that they are in danger of tripping or falling? Is the condition of their living situation causing problems with their family and their neighbors? So what exactly is a hoarder? A hoarder is a person who keeps or collects or saves excessive amounts of objects, pets, in their home to a level that impacts their health, safety, and their relationship with others. Not just somebody who likes to collect, owl figurines or something, or has 3 or 4 cats, but someone who has done this to such an extreme extent that it is really impacting their health, their safety, and their relationship with others. They often rescue other people's trash or are compulsive shoppers. Compulsive shopping is a form of hoarding. They recycle but never actually get rid of it. And in fact, the biggest problem is that they can't get rid of anything, including, in really extreme cases, their garbage, dead animals, and even soiled diapers. And this is something that social workers share with me all the time. So there is a wonderful organization called the Institute for Challenging Disorganization, also known as the ICD, and you can see their website is listed right here. They specialize in clients with hoarding issues, and they have created a hoarding scale, and they also educate and certify professional organizers to deal with hoarding because it is such a specialized field. The ICD hoarding scale has different levels, and these are the first levels that are still actually within normal pathology, normal range, and that includes most of us. And that is normal clutter, and all doors and stairways are accessible, and normal housekeeping. But, not everything's put away. Level 2 is one exit blocked, some pet odor, light rodent or insect infestation, poor housekeeping. Clutter might completely fill 1 to 2 rooms, and furniture and clutter may be a safety hazard for tripping and falling, but it still falls within very uncomfortable, and you don't really like it, and you'd wish that they clean it up, but we're still not beyond a level where it becomes a more serious issue. When it gets beyond this level, this is now has gone into the level of a mental illness. And the usual diagnosis for a hoarder is OCD, or it can be which is obsessive compulsive disorder, which is maybe triggered by loss, or it may be inherited. It might be something that actually runs in the family. If someone is going to intervene in terms of actually removing the clutter, it really does require an ICD professional organizer, but they will have to work in conjunction with a therapist. And often anti-anxiety medications are advised because hoarders are very fragile emotionally and can get very, very scared and very agitated. So anti-anxiety medications are often prescribed. And also the type of therapy is usually cognitive behavioral therapy, where they can start to identify what they're thinking and how this thinking is affecting their behavior. Because hoarders can be very, very fragile emotionally. One of the things that you do see on the TV shows is you will sometimes see the hoarders suddenly just fall apart at the seams and get terribly upset, sometimes very angry, because they're just feeling like they've been invaded and they're overwhelmed. That is very often the case with someone who has gone beyond level 2 and has gone into that level 3 and above. Level 3, it's starting to get really bad. Visible clutter, blocking exits, and covers most services. This can include the bathtub. 2 or more major appliances are not working. This is very, very common to see the house is starting to go into real disrepair. Excessive use of electrical extension cords causing fire hazards. You see this a lot in seniors, particularly if their homes have not been updated to 21st century, and yet they're trying to use all the electronic devices that are out there, and they haven't got the right kind of electrical wiring, and so they'll run electrical cords everywhere. Pets exceed 3 and are not well cared for. That's the secret right there. That's the criteria. The pets are not well cared for. So the cat lady or the rat lady or the dog lady or the bird lady or whoever it is that is starting to collect animals, rescuing them, but can't take care of them. Their hearts are in the right place, but they can't take care of them, so the animals are sick and dying, etc. That's when it becomes a hoarding issue. So people who collect lots of animals and can't take care of them, that's a hoarding. That's a type of hoarding. This, of course, increases the possibility of fleas, spider webs, and now the kitchen and the bathrooms are just filthy, so that when you're visiting, you don't want to use their bathrooms, and you certainly aren't going to drink out of any of their cups if they offer you a cup of coffee or a glass of water or something. Level 4 and 5 usually is when the fire department or the health department have probably already been notified. If the senior, for instance, is in HUD housing, it may be at this point that they're being given a threat of eviction if they don't clean up their apartments because they're now a danger to their fellow residents in the building. This includes structural damage, blocked exits and hallways, mold or mildew on the walls and floors. Not so much of a problem in dry climates like California, but very serious problem in other parts of the country with high humidity. Storing papers in the oven. It seems so peculiar to think that they'll do that, but remember, they're looking for any place, any opening, any orifice, any nook or cranny in their living space where they can put their stuff. And when it gets to where there's no place left, they will put their papers in the oven. 2 or more walls are damaged. There might be holes in the wall, broken windows and doors, hazardous electrical wiring, sewage backup and odor. This is because they're no longer maintaining their property. And their designated bedroom is unusable. And there's rotting food on the counters, and there's no clean dishes or utensils. This is a lot more common than you would believe. It gets worse. Sometimes it gets to the point where they're not paying their electricity, or the wiring in the house has now become so faulty that it isn't working anymore. There's no running water. I've actually seen cases where the person has literally run a garden hose through the kitchen window because the plumbing inside the house is no longer working. The kitchen and the bathroom is unusable. The refrigerator is totally disgusting. Rotting food, rotting dead animals, because remember, if they're hoarding animals and trying to take care of them but really can't, this is what happens. So there are sick, dying, and dead animals, sometimes mummified, sometimes found underneath piles of things that have been there for years. Hanging cobwebs, and the carpet has literally turned to dust so that it looks as if it has a dirt floor. The air is unbreathable because they don't open the windows. And the dust and the foul odors are really, really hard for you to deal with. And you can't see out the windows because they're so dirty. The bed is covered in clutter, and they're sleeping on the floor or in a chair or in a corner of the room, or in some cases, and I have seen this in some of the television shows, they literally burrow cave-like underneath a pile of clutter to sleep. So not sure if your client or the person that you care about is a level 3 or above hoarder. This is what I tell my clients when they call me on the phone and they say, I think my wife is a hoarder, my brother is a hoarder, my sister is a hoarder, my mother is a hoarder. Can you come over and take a look and tell me? I just ask them over the phone this very big question. Where are they sleeping? Because to me, the litmus test for whether or not they have gone beyond class 2 and are now into a situation of mental illness is to check their bed. If one side of the bed is piled with clutter and they are sleeping on the other side, or they're sleeping elsewhere in the home because their bed is now completely piled with clutter, then they're a level 3 or above and they are in a situation of having a mental disorder. And this is something that is really common, and the easiest way for any of you when you're visiting a client, if they'll let you in and if they'll let you see their bedroom, you will find this out. Sometimes they're literally sitting in a tiny little corner where it's the only floor space that is left in the space for them to sit with their knees up against their chest and sleep because the clutter has taken over everything else. Here's some typical behaviors. Over-collecting with the inability to discard anything. One of the biggest ways that this happens is compulsive shopping. People who are compulsive shoppers are hoarders. It is an indication of hoarding. And a lot of them go onto QVC and the shopping channel to get the good deals because good deals give them a rush. But the rush doesn't last, and their reckless spending can endanger their finances. They will also dumpster dive, rescuing other people's cast-offs. They'll rescue animals, but they can't take care of them. And in some cases, they will hoard food, colorful and shiny objects. Now, that sounds a little disrespectful to say that, but the reality is that sometimes that sparkle and that beauty sort of makes them feel good, and they want to feel better. Hoarding food is something that is often seen, particularly in seniors who have emigrated from a country where there has been either extreme poverty or, in the case, for instance, of Chinese immigrants, many of them suffered through the so-called Cultural Revolution, where the Chinese government literally took all the intellectuals, put them out into the farmlands, but told the farmers, don't feed them, don't take care of them, let them figure it out for themselves. If you help them, we will execute you. And so by the thousands, perhaps the millions, these intellectuals starved to death, and their families saw them and watched them starve to death. And so they come to this country and that pain and that experience of lack, of being hungry sticks with them, and they will hoard food even when it makes no sense because it was such a painful experience that they went through. So have some compassion if you do come across that, particularly in certain ethnic groups that did suffer terrible situations in their home countries. They have often unrealistic and grandiose notions of recycling, and they'll recycle everything. And what's frustrating is you'll go into their homes and you'll find that they've taken plastic bags and they roll them up into little packages and they'll put a rubber band around it. Then they'll do that with like 300 more little plastic bags. Then we'll put that in a box. And then that box will be put in another box, and they become really obsessive compulsive about wrapping these little bits to save, but they can't let go of it. They never actually recycle. They will buy gifts for people they haven't even met yet. They will tell you, oh yeah, that pile of stuff over there are gifts to give to somebody. Well, who are you going to give them to? Well, I don't know, but they were such nice things, and I knew someday somebody would want them. They save things for people they hardly know. I had a client who was saving plastic bags because her mailman told her one day that he was saving them for some charity that he belonged to, but that mailman had retired 10 years ago. She was still saving the plastic bags and hoping that someday he was going to show up at her door so that she could give him all these plastic bags, and he would be grateful and think of her as being so wonderful to have done so. They often will attach human feelings to inanimate objects. they worry about, well, where's it going to go if you take it away from here? Where's it going to go? Is that doll that's sitting in the corner over there, if we give it to the Goodwill or to a charity, is somebody going to love it the way I love it? And that is a conversation that you sometimes will have with hoarders. They have grandiose ideas about becoming famous, starting a business, but can't follow through. I hear this from hoarding seniors all the time who decide that they're going to buy beads and little sparkly things to make jewelry because someday they're going to actually have this really fabulous business and they're going to be able to sell all the things that they're making. So their apartments are filled with bins and boxes and bags full of craft materials with the idea that someday they're going to start a business, when in reality they can't follow through. Hoarding is an equal opportunity tormentor. It is seen in all ages, races, professions, socioeconomic backgrounds. But for some reason, it has a disproportionate effect on teachers and academics and seniors. It usually worsens with age and can be extremely difficult to treat. The good news is that hoarders are highly intelligent, often very well-read and well-educated, creative and artistic. But the bad news is they often accompanies other behaviors, and one is passive-aggressive, manipulating. They can get sympathy and free services, and I'm sure some of you out there are nodding your heads how many times you got manipulated into helping a senior only to find that it just wasn't working. And they're very unwilling and unable to take responsibility. It really isn't their fault. And often part of the mental disorder that they have is that they exist in a form of victimhood. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's because nobody loves me, because my parents were mean to me. Whatever it was, you will often hear this as an excuse for their hoarding. They can be very resistant to change and become very hostile because, remember, this is what sort of comforts them, this reckless behavior and this covering themselves in all of these things to sort of hide from the world. If you take that away from them, they feel very exposed and very threatened and very, very fearful. So they'll say things to you like, it's my business, why do you care? Which often mimics an out-of-control teenager. It's very similar behavior. I'll sue you if you try to help me. They will call upon their perfect right to be foolish and self-destructive because they're adults. I'll call the police and accuse you of stealing my stuff. I counseled a social worker who tried to help a lady who was going to be evicted from her HUD apartment, and she wouldn't let anybody help her, and he felt so bad that she was going to end up out on the street. He went in to try to sort of tidy up and take out the trash, and she literally called the police and had him arrested. There is often this grandiosity that happens. Someday I'll be famous, honored, and recognized for my amazing collection of interesting and valuable stuff. They will often show you what they have with great pride, thinking that you're going to be admiring all the things that they've collected. They also can suffer from perfectionism, and they just need to make it all perfect, but perfectionism is also very paralyzing, and so they claim to have a system, and they know where everything is underneath the piles of rubble, and it's hard for you to understand, but they will say to you, well, you just don't understand my system. I actually know where everything is, and there's some kind of sense to all this chaos that you see. It really isn't chaos. Often, if you make an appointment to work with a hoarder, when you get there, they will have hijacked the appointment and trying to redirect you to do something else instead. It's a way of avoiding dealing with the problem in itself, and it's very easy to get caught up in the fact that they'll be very convincing of why this is actually a much better idea to do this other thing than what you had planned to do with them on that particular day. They can also be not particularly gracious or grateful for your time and care. Working with a hoarder can be a very thankless job. If you do this, understand that you know in your heart that you are doing the right thing, and that knowing that yourself is all the thanks that you really need to get from this client, because don't expect them to be grateful. They might, in the beginning, appear to be grateful, but once you start threatening to take their stuff away, or they feel threatened because you are taking their stuff away, that whole feeling can change very, very quickly. Often, not always, but often, hoarders may have other addictions too. It often accompanies morbid obesity, drugs, and alcohol. It just does. So here are some triggers for hoarding. One of them is it could be nature and it could be nurture. It can be inherited. It could be that a mother or a sister or someone else in the family. It can also be a learned behavior because perhaps you've lived with this your whole life. It's very often triggered by loss, and this is one of the reasons why it affects seniors, because seniors, as we know, are in a constant state of loss. They lose their life partners, they lose their health, they lose their mobility, they lose their driver's license, they lose a lot of things. And that can trigger a sense of trying to hold on to everything that you can because you're feeling this loss all the time. So it can be a really important trigger in seniors. It can also be a brain injury or an illness that can trigger this. Obsessive compulsive disorder and depression are the two most widely diagnosed mental disorders for hoarders. So if you are recommending a senior or a client to someone for their hoarding, make sure that professional understands what is going on and do specialize in obsessive compulsive disorder. And often it is accompanied by depression as well. It can also be dementia, and that comes with the aging process. It also comes with the illness. And it can be a combination of all of the above, which makes it not only frustrating to deal with, but really heartbreaking as well. Here are some classic presentations of hoarding. Some things that you don't really understand sometimes when you're watching a TV show or even when you're working with a hoarder or you think you're working with a hoarder. The first one is the rescuing of objects and animals that they perceive to be abandoned and unwanted, just like them. This is a really powerful way to understand what is going on in the mind of a hoarder. Taking care of these objects and these animals gives them a job, a life purpose, and a sense of importance. So they're managing all of these things, and particularly if they're a senior and they've lost their sort of, their job and their role in the world and maybe nobody needs them anymore, they create a need for themselves. It might not make any sense to you, but in their world, now they're important. And somebody or something actually needs them once more. This grandiose saving of the planet is really a challenge for everyone because they will save and recycle for recycling, but they can't actually let go. Now, they're going to tell you the reason that they're not going to send to the recycler is because they don't trust the recycling station that they're actually going to do something important with it, because what they're really going to do, they believe, is they're going to send it to the landfill. And you will sometimes hear, even on the TV shows, a hoarder standing in the middle of absolute filth and squalor and shout to the camera, "I am an environmentalist." And they truly believe that. But remember, the reason they don't trust the recycling is because that's the excuse that they can give to themselves for really not ever having to get rid of it, because the big problem with hoarders is they can't let go of anything at all. Compulsive shopping is something that is really a serious problem, particularly with seniors. If they become disabled and no longer able to drive or walk or shop or dumpster dive, they often resort to home shopping network, TV, QVC, jewelry channels, putting them at great financial risk. Sometimes they'll go online also and do this if they're computer savvy. The compulsive collecting is often combined with the thrill of the catch, and several hoarders have said to me that they just buy it because it was a really good deal and they couldn't pass it up. Never mind it's something that they're never going to use, don't even like the product, but it was on sale and it gave them a rush, a thrill of sort of, it's almost like a gambling kind of addiction of that, wow, I really got a good deal, I got something really special. But the thrill, unfortunately, doesn't last long, and they have to do it again and again. I put a little asterisk by this because this is something that I would love for you to notice next time you're channel surfing and you happen to hit a shopping channel. Please stop and listen to the conversations between the TV shopping hosts and the people that are calling in. Because what you are going to realize when you listen to this is that these people that are calling in are very clearly, in most cases, in many cases, seniors, people living in trailer parks who are on very, very limited income. But what they're getting is a diluted sense of community and friendship with these TV shopping hosts. So you'll hear a conversation like, "Oh, honey, it's so good to hear you again. Yes, you're one of our favorite people that call in." And then the lady or the man will say, "Oh, yes, and I have that in every color. And, oh, you look so cute today, and I love how you've changed your hair. Oh, I'm so glad you noticed." And they start having this personal conversation, which makes this person who is really isolated and lonely suddenly feel like they have a friend. And if it means that they have to call in to buy something in order to have this conversation, they will. This is a serious problem and is seeing it more and more. So be aware of this if you have clients who are suffering from this compulsive shopping and are going online or on the TV and calling in and ordering stuff they don't even need. A perfect example, I had a client in a wheelchair who bought a pair of roller skates because she just loved the lady who was selling them, and they were a really good deal. In a case of compulsive shopping, which is a hoarding behavior, it may be time for a private fiduciary or court-appointed financial trustee to control their spending. Something else to really strongly consider is you can call the TV shopping channels and instruct them to put your compulsive shopper on their do not sell to list. You can also do this with online shopping and catalog shopping. Now, they'll actually thank you for this because when things have to be returned, and I've had a couple of clients where literally my job was to come in by the family and sort through all the unopened boxes or the boxes that had been opened and all the receipts had been lost to figure out how to mail these things back and get a refund. And the restocking cost to the company is quite high. So they're only too happy in reality to receive your calls and contacts. Please make sure that you add this to your repertoire of how you can help a compulsive shopper. Here's some other dangerous scenarios that often happen. A senior invaded by a family member who is a hoarder. Typically, it's a widow or divorced senior with a hoarding adult child who, quote, has nowhere else to go and can't keep a job and may also be a drug addict and or an alcoholic. This is a very common presentation of seniors who have been invaded. The senior, unfortunately, is a codependent in this addiction because there are family dynamics. There may be guilt and all kinds of other things that are playing into this relationship. And there's nothing to be done. The senior, unless the senior is willing to call the police and have this adult hoarding child evicted, generally you can't just talk to them because that's what they want you to do. You just talk to my son or my daughter and you can fix them and tell them I can't live like this anymore. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just talk a hoarder out of their stuff? But the reality is that if that was true, we wouldn't have hoarders at all. The senior is sometimes also keeping other family members' possessions for them. And I've written an article which is included in this webinar as a handout called Another Side of Hoarding. And this is something that I see, and it always mystifies me, a senior living in a small apartment, and yet they're in the corner or in their bedroom are boxes of their children and their grandchildren's personal records, school books, old toys, things that the family doesn't want to get rid of. They dump on their senior. So that's something for you to be aware of because it's one way that you can solve the problem, and that's by calling up the family and telling them that they have to come and get their stuff. Have you received calls like this? Because I get calls like this as a professional organizer all the time. My mother's in the hospital and she's a hoarder. Can you come over and clear out her house before she comes back? My wife is a hoarder and I'm going to leave her unless you can convince her to just get rid of all her junk. I don't want to get rid of anything. Can you just organize it so it looks better and my wife, my landlord, my social worker will stop nagging me? Hoarders are very fearful, and the bottom line is this is what they're really trying to do. They're trying to fill a void in their lives. They're soothing a psychic pain. And in some cases, they're seeking cover from the real world to the extent that they literally will burrow under their collections of things in order to hide from the world. The disorder mimics drug addiction, and those afflicted are often willing to give up the custody of their children, their families, their friends, their marriages, their own safety, health, and welfare, and even be evicted for the sake of their stuff. Hoarders can quickly become frustrated, angry, and even hostile because they are very easily overwhelmed. Remember how delicate they really are. Now, those trained by the ICD to work with hoarders are counseled not to take anyone past level 2 unless the client is in therapy and on anti-anxiety medication. The reason for this is because it's frustrating, and you know what? It's also an unethical waste of time and the client's money. Because unless they're getting the help they need beyond level 2, you are really not able to do the kind of intervention that really needs to be done for them. This is what you are not unless you really are, and I'm sure that there are mental health professionals and marriage and family counselors out there. I'm not sure there's any miracle workers out there, but it's really important, and the reason for this webinar is to help you know what your boundaries are and what you're really dealing with. Don't be a hero, because they can hurt you. They can just make trouble for you, inconvenience you, and you might unintentionally harm them. If you, for instance, were to go into a home of a hoarder who's in the hospital and clear out all their stuff, first of all, unless they have a conservator who has legal right to hire you to do that, you are invading their property, and you are not legally able to go in and take away anyone's property without their permission. Secondly, when they come home from the hospital and they see what has happened to their stuff, even if their home now looks absolutely beautiful and picture perfect, it's going to traumatize them. It could make them very ill. They could have a relapse. They could even become suicidal because of it. So you could unintentionally harm them, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. These are fragile, delicate people, and you have to understand that just getting rid of their stuff is not really solving the problem and can actually cause them great emotional and even physical harm. But I want to talk about the harm it might cause to you, because I get a lot of calls from professional organizers who want advice from me on how to handle the job of clearing out a hoarder. And this is what I tell them. There are risks, physical dangers to dealing with hoarding beyond class 3, particularly when you get into class 4. And that's what I want to talk about with you today. This is something, if you work in real estate or in social work, or you're working in a senior community where a senior is really moved to the level 3 or 4 hoarding, you can't just go in there and clean it out unless you really know what you're doing. Never underestimate the health and safety dangers of working with a hoarder. Often you are going to be dealing, and you may not know until you get in there and you're working with it, that you're dealing with human and animal feces, rotting food, and dead animals, which means hepatitis, E. coli, hantavirus, which comes from rat droppings, and respiratory and intestinal infections, Legionnaire's disease, etc. Do not underestimate the fact that those dangers are real. The vermin is rats, roaches, mice, fleas, mites, and bedbugs. The filth is dust and dirt, which causes skin rashes, eye infections, lung infections, mold, and mildew. If you think you want to do this, then this is what you must do. You must wear protective gear: masks, respirators, goggles, gloves, booties on your shoes, hazmat suits for level 4 and above. Don't bring your work clothes back into your home. You would need to take everything off in your garage, throw them in a plastic bag, and then run naked upstairs to the shower immediately. And I've done it, so I know what I'm talking about, and I don't do that anymore. But better yet, if you're reaching that level, you do want to hire a hazmat crew or a crime scene cleanup crew. There are companies that do both of these things. That's because they are trained professionals with the right equipment. It is absolutely essential that you do that. Now, I want to give you an encouraging word here because you're saying, oh, gosh, I can't go in with gloves and a mask. How insulting to the client. Don't be afraid that you will insult the hoarder by wearing protective gear. If they could be insulted, they wouldn't be in the mess they're in. And I know that we're all kind, wonderful, warm, loving, compassionate people. That's why we are all certified senior advisors. But don't let your heart rule your head. Because if you get sick and end up with a chronic, lifelong disease from lung infections and mold that never leaves your lungs, you can't help anybody. And in addition to that, you didn't buy this junk, they did. I want you to remember that. So don't buy into their victimhood and poor helpless me's, because often they will try to get you to help them, and they are still part of the problem and are not taking responsibility. You need to keep safe. Now, when therapy is not available or even appropriate, or when the client downright resists therapy, you have to know when to let go. This is all you can do. And this is often what we see, particularly in HUD housing and with social workers. All you can do is keep them as safe, clean, and calm as is possible. Bring them back up to a level where they're no longer going to be evicted by their landlord. Possibly their children are actually willing to come and visit them. But expect that the problem is going to require continuous and ongoing intervention. It is not going to get better. It is going to be a continuous process of cleaning them out, because when the stuff goes out the door, they will be finding more to bring back in. Sometimes they will even dumpster dive with the minute you leave and bring it all back. If in extreme cases they are a danger to themselves or others, don't be reluctant to call adult protective services in your county. Or if they become very agitated, in some cases neighbors have problems with hoarders who will, it spills out into the street, the neighbors will confront them, there will be an issue, and the hoarder can become violent, then it's a 5150. If you don't know what a 5150 is, you can look it up online. It's an involuntary psychiatric hold. The police are called. They come in. They take the person to a psychiatric unit for 24-hour observation. Sometimes that is the greatest gift you can give to a family who has washed their hands of this senior, who are frustrated beyond frustration, cannot seem to cope, but the senior is self-destructive and it's breaking their hearts. It can begin the legal process to get them the help that they need. At this point, it may start the process of the courts assigning a legal trustee to oversee their needs. So here are some great resources for you for senior care professionals. These are some of the organizations that I belong to. The National Association of Professional Organizers, this is their national site. There are also local chapters. The Institute for Challenging Disorganization, the ICD. The National Association of Senior Move Managers, these are professionals such as what I am, and that is we pack and we move seniors, we help them downsize and clutter. We can be a great resource for things like, where's the recycling and who can we donate to, et cetera, et cetera. These are some great articles. I highly recommend the Psychiatric Times article, The Perils of Compulsive Hoarding and How to Intervene, to get really clear on where your limits are and to understand what you're dealing with. Probably the best book I have ever read, and the one I recommend to anyone that works with seniors, is David Solis' book, How to Say It to Seniors. It is just absolutely, in my opinion, a required reading for all CSAs. I so highly recommend it. We've got some other books that have been written by wonderful professional organizers. Don't Toss My Memories in the Trash, Overcoming Compulsive Hoarding, and Conquering Chronic Disorganization is written by Judith Kohlberg, who is the founder of the Institute for Chronic Disorganization, really is the spearheaded this whole movement in understanding and helping people who deal with this terrible affliction. How to Conquer Clutter by Stephanie Cope is another great one. And because hoarders are so often very creative and artistic, it's great to read this book, Organizing for the Creative Person. It's a great book. The last one is The Infinite Mind with Dr. Fred Goodwin, and this is actually a CD audio. This was put out by National Public Radio several years ago. I highly recommend that you have a copy of this. This is also something wonderful to loan to families of hoarders who are really at the point of anger and frustration and maybe ready to wash their hands of this loved one because they simply can't get them to do anything about their affliction. This is really a way to listen to not only families but professionals and hoarders themselves who speak about what they're feeling and what they're going through. It can soften the hearts and ease the pain of family members and other professionals who are dealing with hoarders. It really will help you also, and I highly recommend it. The goal is always to improve and protect the quality of seniors' lives. That's what we are all about. But it's also important to keep you safe as well. So please heed my warnings. Be as loving and compassionate as you can be, but keep yourself safe as well so that you can continue offering the wonderful services that you provide as CSAs to our aging population. And that is my presentation, and I've just been delighted to offer this to you today. You can reach me at Marylin C. Ellis at att.net. That is my email. I would be delighted to answer any questions or help you or give you some guidance or refer you where you need help. And I thank you again very much for joining me on this webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Marylin. That was fascinating, and I'm sure an eye-opener for a lot of us. And thank you, audience, for staying with us for the entire, we had a good turnout, and everybody stayed for the whole thing just about, so this has been a very successful webinar. Be sure and look for the invitation to our November webinar, Living to Give, What It Takes to Be a Cancer Caregiver by Joni Aldrich, and that will actually be on November 17th. That's what we've got penciled in right now, but look for the email, and registration should open up pretty shortly for that. So again, thank you for attending this webinar, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.